you. Awesome. Cool. Chris, thank you so
Yes.
much for joining our Phi Seekers virtual meetup that we hold every single month. So I don't want to steal any of your thunder because you're going to tell your story and who you are much, much better than me. But like first and foremost, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day, out of your Phi life to come join us and share some of your wisdom, your energy, your expertise. Really exciting to have you here. So thank you so much. And kind of to kick off, let's kick off with your Phi origin story. How did it all begin? How'd you discover it? Like talk to us about kind of that initial catalyst and maybe even the journey up to that.
Yeah. So for me, I've always had a mindset of being frugal and kind of scrimping and saving. Like that was kind of baked into me, instilled into me from a young age. I was raised by a single mom for a lot of my life, and my grandmother on my mom's side was a big kind of participant in that life too. And she grew up in the Great Depression era, and she just kind of always instilled. She had all these sayings and maxims about saving money or holding on to money or whatever type of deal. So I kind of just through osmosis absorbed a lot of her energy around money, which was good in one sense because it taught me to not just be frivolous and wasteful with it, but I also learned a lot of like scarcity beliefs from her. So all that to say that the first 30 years of my life were pretty much, I'd say, typical in that I was doing all the things that I thought were normal, with the exception of I didn't have as nice as houses or cars as my friends, but I wasn't really doing anything special as far as like, journeying into the financial independence realm. I just thought I was saving so that someday in retirement I was going to have like an amazing life. I one of my job had a pension, like a defined pension plan, and a 401k. So I was contributing to those. My wife at the time was a teacher. She had a pension type plan. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, looking at these grids for our pension, when we turn 65 or 70, life is going to be like amazing. Like we're just going to be able to have a great retirement life. And I was all for, setting life aside for the next 30 years, doing it like I'd seen done, and all of that.
So a
Fast forward
couple quick
to,
questions I want
yes, sir.
to pause. One, where are you growing up with your grandma? What part of the
Ah,
world?
yeah.
Um,
So, oh,
and
sorry.
career, like what kind of work? I mean, pension and
Yep.
401k, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So, I am so a couple things. So the first thing is I grew up in southern Colorado, and actually I'm only about an hour and a half away from where I grew up, and everything. I've got a big family on both my mom's and my dad's side around this area, and that's a big value of ours. So we still live here and in a very cost of living affordable place. So I live in Colorado, and you folks up on the Front Range, you would laugh at what the housing is down here and all of that kind of stuff. It's a pittance, and especially you guys in the Bay Area. I don't even have a clue,
Yeah.
what it's like
Can you
up
share
there.
the exact town, or you're not okay with
Yeah, yeah. So it's a tiny town called Rocky Ford, Colorado. So home of about 1,200 people, and we grow watermelons and cantaloupes. That's not my career, but that's pretty much
that?
the only thing that Rocky Ford has going on, or whatever. But it's a very slow pace of life, very very affordable, and all that kind of stuff. My career, I graduated with a degree in computer science. I graduated from college at the same time as the dot-com burst, and I was living in the Denver Front Range-ish area, and it was very tricky to get a job as an entry level software programmer at that time. Like I would go into like these job fairs, and there'd be like 70 of us in the waiting room or whatever, and I was like, I had 3 months of experience, and everyone else has like 30 years of experience, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be tricky. So I retreated from the Front Range area to go back home. Started landscaping with my uncle, and was just like, oh my God, my life, it's like I just dumped all this money into this education, and no one's ever going to hire me, and kind of poor me, woe is me, and all that kind of stuff. But then I got back into tech. It was a different route from software programming. I actually never went back. Got into just general IT, and then kind of specialized in telecommunications, network engineering, and eventually leadership, and all of that.
Nice.
Yeah,
Awesome. So you're working away,
working away.
just 65, it's so far, but maybe I'll get there one day.
Yeah.
Like, how did you start to, like, okay, I'm frugal, I'm saving, I'm being smarter than my friends, but maybe there's something more to this. Is there more? So, like, how did the FI awakening begin to happen?
Yeah, so the awakening for us, when my wife and I turned 30, we're 41 now. So about 11 years ago, my wife had just had our second daughter, and both pregnancies were pretty tough, but she bounced back from the first pregnancy all right. The second pregnancy, she didn't bounce back so well from. It wasn't one of those where it was like completely obvious, like looking at her, it seemed pretty good, but she just had a lot of like body aches and cramps and a whole bunch of new symptoms that she'd never had before in her first 30 years of life. Um, so there was about a 3 to 5 year window from 30 to 35 of just going to lots of doctors and getting all sorts of diagnoses and just Googling the crap out of everything because this is all brand new to us. And so it was all brand new scary to us too, because usually when you Google something, some kind of disease, the first result you find is going to scare the hell out of you. And it did, it scared the hell out of us. So my picture perfect world at 64, 65 started to crumble. And because some of these diagnoses um, did not look well for my wife at 65, we weren't going to be hiking, big trails. We weren't, some of that stuff. All that to say, that was kind of the wake up call. That was basically something that took me from, hmm, let's let's just kind of do what we're doing now, and 65 is going to look great, and then starting to ask the question, is there any way we can fast forward this, or is there any way I can do a sabbatical or something? Because I don't know if it's a sabbatical to enjoy these good years with her, or I don't know if it's a sabbatical because I'm going to have to start taking care of her. um, and just to not be overly kind of like what happened or whatever. She's 41 now and doing pretty dang good. Like some of those diagnoses were misdiagnoses, and she's gone on a whole health journey and a whole journey all unto herself, and that has helped to keep her situation actually better than it was in the early days of her first symptoms starting to show up. And it's looking like, she's going to have a pretty normal sustained life or whatever. So I don't want to kind of like leave it out there like, she's terminal and there's anything
Yeah.
like that. But for a few years we were pretty nervous and scared.
Yeah, that
Oh, I was going to say, Chris, I might plug Debbie's book. And, you're welcome to do it for me. But Debbie has a really great book about her journey. And it could be life-changing for some people to really understand the transformation she went through. So I wanted to make sure that people know, if you want to learn more about her story, it's called The Other Side of Perfect by Debbie Emick. And
Yeah.
Chris, I don't know if you want to say any more about it.
Yeah, so she just launched that book February 1st, and Anna was gracious enough to be one of the beta readers, and she got some great feedback from you on that. But yeah, it's I mean, I was a beta reader as well. For anyone that kind of has childhood trauma, chronic illness, autoimmune disease, and falls in line of like the people pleasing tendency, I think this book is very helpful and powerful. It'll should open up some new ideas and tactics and all that. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Anna, would you maybe even throw a Amazon link to it, or whatever the best way to buy the book is, into the chat? That's really awesome. We definitely want to support our guests who come on to this show. So that's really, really awesome. So, okay. back to the story. Scary wake up call. Like, shit, life might not
Yes.
be as long as we thought. Like, how do we like maximize our time here as a family? So what's next? What did you like? As you're going through these diagnoses and you're like, kind of freaking out about the potentially limited time that you have as a full family. Like, what's going through your mind, and kind of like what were the next steps?
Yeah, so the next steps were just a bunch of Googling, and I knew I didn't know anyone that had like quote unquote retired early or anything in that space, but I knew there were some people that owned investments that seemed like that could buy them some time. And I didn't hardly know anything about it. My grandparents, the same grandparents that taught me money is scarce, they owned rental real estate, but they never used it necessarily as like um, a passive income generating uh, we can use this to buy back our time. It was more of like, let's create more wealth and then also still hold on to that wealth and hold on to that cash flow or whatever.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have a whole lot of great in-person role models to teach me that, but it seemed like from the internet searches I was doing, real estate and self storage seemed to pop up the most and seemed to be like something in line with what I could wrap my head around. Like I can picture owning a house and I can picture the things that someone's going to do to a house and all that kind of thing and all of that. I just needed to learn the nuts and bolts. And so I kind of dove headfirst into like Bigger Pockets podcasts and their forums. I just started soaking up all I could. I bought pretty much any book that had like real estate and retirement in the title or subtitle. I bought it and read it and just started getting a real taste for possibilities because there's a whole spectrum of people out there doing real estate. And I could see the guys that were just like leveraged to the hilt and, do just basically build this real estate empire in the next 5 years. And I could see the people that were like save up cash, buy everything in cash, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's even before I found out about financial independence. So it's almost like I was already in the game of real estate for cash flow to buy me some time back, either so I could go to part time or buy some years of sabbatical-ish type stuff or whatever. But I still wasn't looking at it until like a retirement of someday I can leave work altogether, and if I want to, never have to work again.
Yeah.
That didn't come until about 2017, 18. Combination of Afford Anything podcast, Choose Five podcast, and all that. Because it seemed like there was a time there where real estate and financial independence podcast were cross promoting and pollinating each other. And that's how I landed into there's other people out there that are
Mhm.
doing this other thing, financial independence wise. It gave me this community of like, I'm not totally weird, or there's other inspirational stories that can now help to fuel me forward when I'm scared to like, what do I do? Do I do this or this or this or this? And just kind of stagnate.
Awesome. So give us a sense of kind of the timeline there. So you 30 was the wake up call.
Hmm.
Then you started, looking into real estate. Like, what age did you like buy your first property?
Yeah.
How long did you spend researching before you actually like got into the business?
Yeah, so 30 is the wake up call. 34, 5 is probably I'm going to start consuming a whole bunch of information. 36 is when we bought our first single family home. And actually, the first year, so 2016, I think actually we bought in the fall of 2015 or 16 our first home. And then the next year, we bought like 7 or 8. So we had a decent amount of money sitting aside. And once I figured out I was going to start going down this financial independence path through real estate, I stopped overpaying my mortgage. I stopped contributing to my kids' 529. I stopped over. There was a lot of safe things I was doing. I had a nest or not a nest egg, an emergency fund of like 2 years of living expenses. So I started chopping away at some of that stuff that gave me a whole lot of like, oh, this is what safe, conservative savers look like, and started kind of embracing the mindset of I need to put my dollars out there so they can start making me more dollars. So that 35, 36, 37 year time frame is where I stopped putting all of those things into the safer vehicles and just started building up piles of, each time I get X amount of dollars, I'm going to buy a house. And then I'm going to use the cash flow from that plus all the savings from my income. And then we're going to buy another house, and so on and so forth, to kind of build that house buying snowball until we got to our number.
Amazing. So I'm curious, I guess, like when, I mean, first and foremost, awesome that you finally discovered the kind of financial independence community, and then started to get more inspired. I mean, again, that's what this meeting is all about, is
Yeah.
like connecting with other people on this journey. So I'm sure as you're kind of going down that path, you started to find the people in the space that were doing it more like you wanted to do it, because there's a million different ways to like do FI. So I'm curious, kind of, before we talk about you actually getting to your FI and pulling the trigger, like who were kind of your inspirational role models as you finally discovered, as you discovered this whole like FI thing?
Yeah, so I mean, the people I guess I would call my mentors that I've never met, were like Paula Pant from the Afford Anything podcast, the Bigger Pockets podcast in the early days with Josh and Brandon. Those were like the mentors, and then going into the forums of Bigger Pockets, that was kind of like my first sense of community. I actually attended a Camp FI event, and this was I guess far into the journey, i.e. 3 years or 4 years after we started, but we were getting close to our FI number at that point too. So we went to a Camp FI event. That's actually where I met Anna. And I see another couple faces on here that I've met at Camp FI events. But that was super helpful, because it's one of those type of deals where the idea is like that my mindset is, oh, we're going to show up to this financial independence event and we're just going to talk about money. But it's like, no, it's like we talk about the dreams that we want to pursue, because money is now on the sidelines. Like we no longer have to you know create all this room in our head for, how do we deal with money? How do we deal with money? Or am I doing the right thing with money? Because we're kind of on this path and everything. So a lot of folks in the Camp FI space, and then I've gone to FinCon a couple times, not because I'm an influencer or a money media personality myself, but just because I'm like, well, all the money media personalities that I like to follow seem to go to this FinCon thing. So I'm going to go to this FinCon thing. And that was, again, another kind of eye-opening thing where, yes, you learn some tips and tricks of like, oh, you bought your first property this way, or this is how you find deals, or this is how you created your LLC. Sure, you're going to learn some of that, but also just being around people that are just sharing their dreams of like, this is what I want to do, when I buy back my time, when I'm not trading my time for dollars and all of that. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yes, thank you so much for kind of sharing your mentors and your inspiration, because I'm sure there's, people on here that are either, getting into real estate or already into it. And it's always great to kind of like, those people who do put out a lot of content kind of on your subject that you want to pursue, in, the vein of FI that you want to go down. So thank you so much for sharing that. So when and how, I assume this whole time you're doing all this, you're still working your IT job.
correct.
And like, give us a little sense of the feeling. Like, did you love work? Did you hate it? Were you just like, it's okay, but it's not fulfilling? Like, how was like working and pursuing FI for you? Like, walk us through kind of like the emotional landscape of that.
Yeah, so again, like ages 30 through 35, as we're walking this walk of discovering my wife's health and all that kind of stuff, I was still loving work at the time. Like I knew that we needed to have I needed to have options, and so that's what led me down the path of looking into like real estate and financial independence and all that. But my wife was able to leave teaching. Her full-time job was teaching up until again 34, 35, and at that point we had enough No, actually, we didn't replace her income. We didn't have a single investment at that time. We just knew that if we started budgeting and doing some things different with our lives, we could scale back a little bit, and actually she could leave her job at 35, and it wasn't going to be that big of a of a of a of a deal. So that was amazing in two ways. One, the first way was that um, it was one of those where we pulled the trigger and I was just waiting for the ball to drop. Like I was just waiting for like 3 months in, it's like I'm gonna get clobbered. Like, again, that scarcity mindset about money. Like, okay, my wife's teacher salary is gone. This is where we're gonna start hitting, problems are going to come at us. We're not going to have enough money. We're going to be living on the streets. I'm going to be the worst father ever type of thing. But nothing happened. Like those first 2 years was like, man, I don't even feel like I changed my lifestyle at all. My wife's at home now. She's having less stress. She's able to homeschool our kids, and she's able to spend more time with them. So that was just like, whoa, that wasn't that big of a deal. But I'm still loving my job. And at this point too, her health is kind of stabilized. So it's like, oh, I guess I don't actually need to leave my job per se anytime too terribly soon. Then we got a new CEO, and and I did not click well with him. We went from kind of being an organization, a small organization that was just like dedicated to our customers and passionate about it, and then we started to turning into what I felt like was corporate, even down here in this tiny little town. It just felt corporate, where it was all about numbers and employees, and our customers no longer mattered. And it just felt not fulfilling. Even though I was in a leadership role that I loved being able to pour into my people, it just felt unfulfilling holistically, because it didn't feel like my team and the way I was doing it was part of someone else's vision or solution. So that's when it was like, okay, I'm gonna push this lever even farther forward of taking action, and that's what I think actually that's what got me to get into the mindset of I'm gonna buy my first property.
Interesting. So basically, you were loving work, then like new CEO, and suddenly the whole culture of the company changed, and you're like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And was that like almost like within like the first few weeks or months of this new CEO coming into the the scene, or was this like a few years? Like, how did that happen?
It was about a year after he came onto the scene. The first actual year, I was a huge fan of his. He did, like when he was younger, he climbed the mountains that I want to climb and all that kind of stuff. So we talked about mountaineering and outdoors and all this kind of stuff. So I was impressed by like the things he enjoyed doing as his lifestyle. It was just like I could tell that we were two trains that were not headed in the same direction. Like we were just running into each other, and I'm like, I don't want to live this life of I'm scared to be me, or I'm scared to do the things I want to do because I know it's going to upset the new CEO, or it's not in line with his vision. And I'm like, I just want to be open and authentic and transparent. That's just like, that's how I'm wired. And I knew that with conversations, even with him, where I was like, this is not going to work, type of deal. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I did that for a couple of years as we were rapidly building our portfolio and getting close to the number of units that I needed to do in order to kind of hit my FI number of sorts, instead of having like the 4% rule or 25x of my cost of living. I knew I needed to get to 20-ish units that were cash flowing about $200 a month. That would give me $4,000 a month, and that was actually above what our cost of living here was. So it's like it took care of our basic necessities. It took care of most of our kind of discretionary things like travel and some of the just fun stuff of life. So once we got to that, I felt very comfortable. Like, okay, at any point I can pull the trigger, and I know our base needs are met, and we're not going to just, be eating ramen noodles every day, and having the heater set to like 2 degrees or anything. So
Awesome. So you're working away. I mean, first property at 34 or 35.
Yep.
And someone's asking us to repeat the numbers. So yeah, basically he was looking to get 20 units to cash flow, approximately 4,000 per month. So that's 48,000 a year for those who are thinking more like what's the 4%. So yeah, did I get that right, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe for this audience too, like the other thing that we were already probably at unit, we had 5 or 6 rentals about the time that I discovered financial independence, and I started seeing people that were going the route of, putting this money in VTSAX, and I actually do that as well. So it's not like I'm against that method. It was just I wanted to get there faster, and so I think the number that I kind of throw around is I'm about probably $120,000 of my money in to get to that 48,000 a year lifestyle, compared to if I needed to get to a $40,000 lifestyle, I would need to have a million, in VTSAX to be able to pull that 4% off. I'm not sure if I'm losing people here or anything
No,
like that,
that's
but
actually incredible. And like it's totally okay to get super technical in this, because the people who don't get it, like they'll just ask someone else in it, or they'll just like go read up on it, or they just won't understand. For the people who are trying to understand this, you just said something that just blew my mind, actually, because I've never thought about that. I'm, fully no real estate, all, in index funds. So you said 120,000 invested of your own cash into real estate to basically create that 40,000 to 48,000 a year, versus having to put in a million into VTSAX. That was the trade-off that you were looking at.
yeah. And so I'm just kind of trying to do the quick math in my head again to make sure I'm not, bullshitting anyone here or whatever. So it was basically like we started with a pile of 60,000, and then we were saving, about 2,000 ish out of my paycheck every month.
Mhm.
And so we did that for a few years, but every single property we bought, we were using the 200 a month ish cash flow for that to also go into buying that next property. So when I say 120,000, I'm kind of thinking of like, this is what Chris and Debbie had saved. This is what 60,000 was saved, and then about another 60,000 came out of my paycheck or our family's income, and then the rest came from cash flow from those properties. But it's not like that number was a huge number too. So it's one of those where I should probably have that number in my head of like all in between the real estate cash flow that bought us properties as well as our savings that bought us properties. I would guess that number's 150 to 200,000 total. So again, you could even compare that number maybe to a million in a portfolio or
And
whatnot.
still, that's like, that's
Yeah.
$750,000 less.
Yeah.
So that's pretty incredible. That's really cool. For those people who are trying to get after FI, reach FI even faster. I mean, here's a shining example of someone who was like, I'm not going to wait to, save $1 million and invest it. I need to do this faster. So kind of on that note, Chris, you do have a blog that we've failed to mention so far. So one, just to segue into the blog, and then I'll circle back to, I see some questions about kind of like what your real estate was made up of. And then we still got to like talk about how you actually pulled the trigger and all that stuff. But tell us, like, I want to understand the naming behind your blog, because I love the name. And I've been wanting to ask you for so long, like, why'd you name it that? What does it mean to you? And instead of like asking you that over Instagram, because that's how Chris and I met, I figured I'd save it for this. So tell us what your blog name is, and then tell us like what you named it. And then this is a 3-part question. If you forget it, I'll follow up.
I'm usually only good for 2 parts, max.
The first part is, do you tell any of your deeper like FI stuff about how you did it on the blog? So you could answer that first.
Okay.
So are you sharing any of these numbers and kind of like how you did this FI thing on your blog?
Not really. I didn't want to start it as like yet another financial independence blog. I almost wanted this to be like, what does one's life look like after financial independence? Even there, it's not a very good blog for that. It's
Yeah.
basically a good parking space and a domain right now, while I try to figure some things that I want to do more with it. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so there's not a whole lot of fi-ish detail. There are a few kind of mindset blogs on there as far as like pulling the trigger at my job and all of that. But actually, the majority of the blog content is about adventuring and stuff. Our podcast, which is also on there, probably is the more relevant information as far as like I'm consistent with that. Like we just actually wrapped up our season 2 of the podcast. That's my wife and I talking about a little bit about money. This is not like a technical details, like here's how to get financial independent, but just more of like the mindset of like, okay, now we have this time on our hand. We both want to grow and to be better humans and better parents and better friends and better husband and wives. Here's some of the shit we're working on.
Awesome. Cool. So what's the name of your blog? What's the name of your podcast? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah, and I'm honestly on here like I could not even talk at all about my wife's book or whatever. I'm just here to serve because I found so many great inspirational folks along my journey that I'm pretty sure if I wouldn't have met one or two or three of them, I wouldn't be where we are today, and I'm really glad for where we are today. So this is not me trying to promote myself, but yeah, it's gobucketyourself.com, and so behind the name Go Bucket Yourself, the idea is we all have this one life. We all have this terminal illness called death that's just out there. Some of us know, or actually none of us know when that's going to happen. We think we have a finite amount of years, and it always seems like that's far out in the future. And our wake up call through Debbie's, my wife's illness, just really was this on at first glance this negative thing, but we took this negative thing and we fueled it into not only being more intentional with our lives, which was a huge blessing, but also taking that negative thing and using that as a vehicle to start conversations and start community where we can hopefully talk and connect with other people and help them and serve them in some way or another. So go bucket yourself. The idea there is the action is go, like do this, don't wait, don't study, don't read, don't just do this, don't do that kind of info knowledge, because that's actually words to my own ears, because I'm the kind of guy that's like, oh, I need to read 10 more books or 20 more books. I need to hear 10 more podcasts, or I need to connect with 5 more people before I pull the trigger. And it's like, no, go, you sure you need to educate a little bit, but getting going is the hardest part. And once you get over that hump, once you get a little inertia created, it's an amazing thing. Bucket, the idea there of living a bucket list life, or living your dream life, or daring to do things that maybe are a little unconventional and not normal, and all that. And then yourself, like again, the idea is not like come absorb all of Chris Emick's cool things and be so jealous that he gets to go do these cool adventures or whatever, but more of like the idea of go bucket yourself. So like every single one of you on this call, Jill and John and Christine and all that kind of stuff, go bucket yourself. Like here's some inspiration, here's some stories, here's some stuff that's worked for us, but you go out there and do it and be that amazing person that's going to then be an inspiration for someone else and help pay that forward.
Awesome. I love it. Uh, so circling back, a bunch of people are asking like, one, where are your properties? And two, what is the makeup of your properties? The first one being a single family home. Like, tell us where and the mix. Give us a little bit more detail before we talk about kind of like you actually pulling the trigger.
Absolutely. So our number was 20. We actually got to 19, and actually out of those 19, only 18 are performing. We kind of got a buy one get one free deal, and so that get one free needs some work. And even though I've been retired for a year and a quarter, I have not given it that work. So I'm kind of sitting on some undue cash flow there. But 19 properties is what we have. 13 of those are in our immediate vicinity here of Southern Colorado. So again, no one's ever heard of this town, but La Junta, Rocky Ford, those are there. And that's where 13 of those properties are. We do self-manage those properties. Then we have 6 that we bought turnkey out in Memphis, Tennessee. So they were bought, if you're not familiar with turnkey, that's basically the concept of I did not go out and find this deal. I did not rehab the deal, and then I do not place the tenants or manage the deal. Basically, there's several companies actually in Memphis and some of these kind of hot spots around the Southeast that investors go to that are just in the business of they acquire, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of homes each year that are in complete disrepair. They get great deals on them. They've got good systems in place where they take them from a garbage heap to a rent ready home in a very short window and very efficiently, and then they sell them to an investor like me, and then I just basically collect the cash flow checks, month to month.
Awesome.
So those ones cash flow a little. So the A/B comparison there, they're all single family homes. We have actually one property that was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath Victorian style house that was converted, not by us, but by someone else, into a 1-bedroom, 1-bath upper unit and a 3-bedroom, 1-bath lower unit. That's the only multifamily-esque property that we own. That was kind of our strategy based off of several of the books I read, and from talking to local landlords. It seemed like, especially if it's one of those where they take a giant house and carve it into 4 units, those can be kind of nightmares to manage because the electricity and the plumbing and all that kind of stuff kind of commingle, and it's not easy to work on. So besides that not being, that was one reason we didn't really want to play with multifamily too much. And the second biggest reason probably was they just weren't as easy to find. The single family homes were easy to find, and we would buy the houses that people had smoked in or cats peed all over or whatever type of thing, because most of us here don't want to buy that as our first home or as our starter home or whatever. But as a rental, as a real estate investor, those are kind of like the goodies. It's like, ooh, this reeks. People are going to be walking away, and it's my offer is probably going to be the only offer, so I can kind of come in at a pretty good price for me, and might be able to get the deal.
Awesome. So basically, 6 turnkey, 13 self-managed. So definitely one of the questions out there right now is like, how much time are you spending managing those 13 properties?
Yeah, I would say like right now, all of our units are occupied. Right now, it's probably a 1 hour a week job. That's mainly because we have a handyman or a series of handymen slash folks. And I got out of one thing I took away early on is we were starting to talk about real estate and talk to other landlords in the area, is most of them were burnt out because of maintenance, because of getting a call on a Saturday where it's like a beautiful Saturday, sunny Saturday right now. Instead of going on a hike, they're fixing something. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be that stingy guy, or I was going to find a deal that could afford to pay for the maintenance. So I wasn't going to be crawling in crawl spaces on my weekends and all of that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean I haven't done any maintenance myself. We just had a big cold snap come through Colorado 2 weeks ago, and I did go help thaw out a pipe. So there are times where I go do that kind of work myself, but I kind of like pick and choose unless it's a real urgent one and I can't get a hold of anyone else. So that said, when it's tenant hunting time around the May, June, July, that's when a lot of people move. So when our tenants are turning over in that time frame, it probably ramps up to a 5 to 10 hour a work week job at that point. I'm looking to kind of systematize that using either going in with some other landlords and hiring someone kind of part-time to just man the phone, to where they follow scripts if it's a tenant placing thing, or they call the plumber if it's a plumbing thing, or all that kind of thing. Because mainly that's what I'm doing right now. I'm putting on the tenant screening hat, which just puts our tenants or would applicants into a funnel, and anyone, I could teach anyone how to do that. And then we'll still maybe be the ones that actually sign the lease and pick the ultimate tenant, but just getting them in the funnel is probably the biggest work, because you're responding to 50 people, copy pasting the same email and all that kind of stuff. I can train someone to do that. So it is some work. And at first, before I left my job, my wife was doing all of that. And so there would be times when, between managing those properties and homeschooling and being like the stay-at-home mom where she was preparing meals and all that kind of stuff, it did get overwhelming. But now, since the two of us kind of share that job, it feels pretty darn easy, in that sense.
Yeah. So I'm curious, kind of like a little bit more about kind of like that, like learning the ropes period, that build up period. Like, when you were still working, your wife was, kind of mom slash real estate manager slash, husband, or sorry, wife,
Yep.
kind of preparing the meals. Like, was that like a year? Was that multiple years? Like, how was that ramp up time? Because I think it's, at least to me, I want to understand like how much suck did you have to go through to get to like where you're at now, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'm usually kind of the happy version, where my wife will give you the more real version, because I kind of forget all of that stuff. So in the early days when we were buying, especially the properties we were buying around here, we were doing all the rehab ourselves, which did suck, sometimes. Thankfully, like in my mind, I just knew this was a short-term game we're playing for a long-term benefit. But yeah, so like when we're buying those properties, like a lot of nights and weekends were spent, of my time were spent, rehabbing those properties. And so my wife, like some weekends, I even have some pictures on my Instagram or whatever of like the girls. My girls were probably 12 and 7 at the time, and we're building fences and we're redoing roofs and we're laying flooring, and my daughter's caulking around the trim and all that kind of stuff. So I still have some good memories even in that suck period, but I'm glad I'm done with that. Like, I'm glad that I'm not spending nights and weekends doing that. So there was about a 3 to 4 year period where we're starting to accumulate properties, and each time we're accumulating properties, we're having to rehab them. And my wife now has one more tenant to kind of manage or whatever. So it's getting a little bit more. Like when we only had 2 or 3 tenants, you're not going to hear from every tenant, every month by anything, but you get 13 tenants, and then you might hear from a tenant, once a month or something, because you have to go fix something, or they have a question, or they're getting ready to move out, or all that kind of stuff. So there was probably 3 to 5 years of occasional suck to deal with. But again, it was whereas with the turnkeys, we didn't have any of that. Like, we never deal with that. So that's kind of my thing now. Like, usually if someone finds out that I'm doing real estate and they're a working professional and all that kind of stuff, I kind of try to steer the conversation towards either turnkey or look, you probably don't want to be the rehabber and the property manager, because even though it's sexy when Chip and Joanna Gaines do it on HGTV, sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes you're going to have a fight over, I told you not to put the flooring in like that, or why didn't you do this, or whatever type of thing, and such. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Just for my own selfish personal reasons, like, I enjoy my work, and like, I'm not really interested in like rehabbing homes, but I do want to kind of like diversify my FI. So like, I'll definitely be picking your brain after the show about like the turnkey solutions,
yeah,
if you don't mind, because I think I've been waiting to meet someone like you, to be honest, who's doing that, who's also a FI person, because I know people who do that for a living, but they don't know what FI is, and I'm a little hesitant to like trust them, to be honest. So awesome. Cool. So we'll circle back. I know people have a bunch of kind of like questions more about real estate, but I want to get to the like, the meat of the like you pulling the trigger. You know, you mentioned that you've been like officially FI for a year and a half now. So walk us through kind of like that ramp up to really pulling the trigger.
Yeah, so the ramp up was I knew about this date, fall of 2019, that if we could actually, yeah, we already had the number of properties we needed, and I was super close to paying off my mortgage, so that was going to drop our housing expenses even more
Like
to
your
where
personal
then
mortgage,
what's that?
your personal mortgage for the house you're living in.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, like we'd got to the number of properties of cash flow that we needed, but I wanted some extra cushion. And since our mortgage was low, I actually did take that last probably 8-ish months of real estate cash flow and my income savings and use that to basically pay down our mortgage to where we did not have a mortgage payment. So part of that was just, again, I can I can I'm mostly risk averse. You know, I can dabble in things, but I was like, okay, even if all comes to a horrible end, at least the bank's not going to come get my house or whatever type of thing.
Yeah.
I might not have electricity or water or trash service or whatever, but they're not going to get my house. So, anyways, by doing that, we were like our cash flow was just above our living expenses, you know, in the fall of 2019. That's where it was headed. But then by paying off our mortgage, we got a little bit more cushion to where we could weather a series of bad months in a row in real estate and still not have to alter our lifestyle all that much. And even years of like if it was really bad for a number of years, we could our discretionary would come down, but we'd still be able to take care of those base needs, you know, and all that kind of stuff.
So were you holding on to a decent size of like cash to kind of like cover OpEx of the properties? You know, if like all hell broke loose.
Yeah. So the real estate company, our kind of general number right now is 6 months of costs. So not like 6 months of gross rents, but 6 months of costs is kind of the real estate's piggy bank or savings or OSHIP fund. And then Chris and Debbie Emick also have our own emergency fund of if real estate stops paying us money, here's how we'll still buy groceries and pay the light bill and all that kind of stuff.
Do you mind sharing how much that is?
Yeah, so it's actually a yeah 36,000. So where did I come up with that number? I've got several things shoved together right now, so it's almost like it's a chunk of something bigger. But I think about 36,000 is our emergency fund, and our non-discretionary budget per month is about 1,200. We don't have car payments. We don't have a mortgage. So it's basically groceries, keeping the utilities on, and those kinds of things and we have old cars. So our insurance and registration are just like nothing. So we have very small amount of like, this is what it takes for us to exist type of money. But anyways, it's at least a year or more of this is what it takes to feed us and keep our lights on type of
Yeah.
money. And then our discretionary, our travel and giving back and those kinds of things, those are on top of that.
And do you mind sharing your 6 months of like real estate costs number? If not, by the way, anything you don't feel comfortable sharing, you do not have to share.
Yeah, no, I like being an open book. I've learned a lot from people being open books. So our real estate, about monthly, we have 8,000 to 9,000 of gross rents, and about 50% of our gross rents are debt repayment, the mortgage payments for those rental properties, as well as the utilities, maybe closer to 60%. So what that number is, but that's kind of the formula we used. Was we wanted to have, it's about, you know, they a common rule of thumb in real estate is, you know, 50% of your gross revenues will go to expenses, and that's not including debt repayment, debt servicing or whatever. So I would say about 60% of gross revenues are 60 to 65% go towards both debt repayment and covering the expenses. So that said, 9 grand a month of gross revenue is about maybe 5,500, 6 grand per month of debt repayment and expenses, and we have about, I think, 24,000 in kind of that, so like 4 months ish maybe
Okay.
of a of an oh crap fund for real estate.
Gotcha. Cool.
I'm not
Awesome.
sure. I usually have to like write these things down as I say them. So if someone's out there checking my math and I'm way off, call me on it and put it in the chat box. Any kind of follow up, I'll make sure to correct anything that I may have misled anyone on.
Yeah, and no worries there. Like I think there's a lot of different type of five people and on this virtual hangout as well. Some people are so hardcore about the numbers, they know everything, they have spreadsheets and they're like maniacal about it. And then there's other people who are kind of like I think a little bit more like me, like kind of loosey goosey, like, okay, I know my savings rate, I know my net worth, I know like I have X amount in like, cash for emergency fund, but I'm not like calculating hardcore numbers and keeping track of those like every single day. So totally.
Yeah, up
Okay.
until pulling the trigger, I was like, I could tell you every single number. Anyone that could ask me on this call, I would tell you every number. But now that I haven't had to as much, other than people asking me about it, and I want to give them some numbers that make sense so that it's not just like, oh yeah, I bought some real estate and then I left my job. I was like, well, that doesn't help a whole lot of people. So
awesome. Cool. So you're basically almost there. You paid off your mortgage. Like, how'd you leave your job? Like, what, how'd that all happen?
yeah, so I actually bought a domain once called 2 Year Notice because I wanted to give myself, or I basically wanted to kind of, if you're familiar with the story of like burning the boats, I knew I had to burn the boats because if I didn't, I would get caught in that kind of 1 more year complex of like, well, next year I'll do it. After we get to this level, then I'll do it. After we get to this level, then I'll do it. So I didn't quite give a 2 year notice, but I did give a 1 year notice to my employer that I was leaving. We're in a small area in tech, so there's not like a whole lot of people that are looking at tech jobs or qualified for tech jobs around here. And I was in a leadership position, so I just wanted to give my employer the benefit of the doubt, but I also wanted to kind of burn the boat where it's like, okay, I've told some friends, I've told some family. As soon as I tell my employer, that's going to look pretty stupid, if a year from now, when I said I'm going to retire or I'm going to leave my job, then I'm like, oh, actually, I was just kidding, keep me on, let's go through this. So I burned the boat about a year ahead of time. I told my boss, he kept it kind of between him and I for a few months, and then we started to tell my team as we started to try to replace me, even while I was still there and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it was about a year, and I pulled the trigger because yeah, I was confident enough. We'd had several years now of cash flow, and while it wasn't several years of the cash flow we needed, because some of those years we only had 2 properties or 4 properties or whatever, I had enough of a basis to understand that sure, there's going to be problems that come along. So this property might go months without cash flowing, but these properties should do all right. So once I had a general, and once I could look at my books and look at all the spreadsheet and be like, okay, yes, if I would have averaged out 2018, we'd have been fine. If I would have averaged out 2017, we'd have been fine. If I averaged out 2019, we'd have been fine. So once I had some of that data behind me, it gave me enough courage to say like, okay, if I don't leap, I need to leap, because I can see myself just delaying this forever and ever and ever, 1 year at a time, if I don't pull the trigger. So I decided early in 2019 I was going to pull the trigger, and so I let them know that after Thanksgiving 2019 I will not be back, and I stuck to it.
So you pulled the trigger right before, like 3 or 4 months before COVID.
Yep, exactly.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, that last year, knowing that it was your last year, did that make work better or worse, or what was that like?
Yes is the answer to that. It was better in many ways because I knew that I was working towards this thing, and the kind of shitty parts of my job didn't seem as shitty, because I'm like, in 6 months or 7 months or 8 months or 2 weeks, I'm done with these shitty parts. And the parts that I loved about my job, my leadership and my one-on-ones with my team and all that kind of stuff, I had a new appreciation for them. It's like, these are going to disappear at some point. So it was almost like, I got to appreciate those even more. I also had some really great conversations. Like, coworkers reached out to me, both from the perspective of, hey, how are you able to do this? And two, just like, oh my God, I would love to be able to do this, or I'd love to be able to spend time with my friends or my kids or my grandkids and all that kind of stuff, and just having some of those stories. So that was the thing that I wasn't like, I didn't even see that one coming. I thought a little bit about I'm gonna be able to kind of ignore the stuff I don't like, and I'll be able to really latch on to the stuff that I do like and enjoy that. Just the heartfelt stories. Many tears were shed in the break room after I kind of after everyone in the company knew, and they were talking to me and they're just telling me their stories. But it's almost from that place of like, I could never do that, or I wish I could do that. And I'm like, you can do that. If Chris Emick can do this, anyone can do this, type of thing. And so yeah, that
Wow.
last year was a memorable one for sure.
That's a really cool way. You're honestly the first person that I've spoken to or read about that like literally gave a year notice to their employer that they're like pulling the trigger. I'm curious, like a little bit more detail about that. How did you actually like? Did you say you're retiring? Like, what did you tell them you're doing in a year?
So my immediate boss knew that I had been buying rental real estate, and he'd even asked me questions over the previous year or two about that, because he was looking into either buying like just some commercial real estate. His daughter was a massage therapist, and so he was like, "Hey, I'm looking at this property where it's the bottom unit could be a massage studio, and the top unit could be a rental and all that kind of stuff." So he kind of asked me questions about, how do you run the numbers, how do you do all that kind of stuff. So he knew that I'd been accumulating properties, and I wasn't and he also did not like the CEO. So we kind of had several kind of like sessions of like him and I doing some sessions of that, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to be around forever, and I'm packing parachutes right now just in case this hits the fan, because I do not want to stay married to this company or the CEO and all that kind of stuff. So we had a pretty good relationship. It wasn't much of a surprise when I told him, hey, I'm ready to pull the trigger. It's going to be 11 months, 12 months from now. It wasn't a surprise there. The rest of my team and all of that, uh, they were, I guess, they were surprised or shocked or like, what? But I guess that your specific question was, did I use the word retire? I did. Even though I have a little bit of trouble with that word, I knew it was enough of a provocative word that it would get some people to ask me questions. And I wanted to be able to talk to people about those questions and hopefully either give them answers or point them towards answers. So if I just said like, I'm taking some time off or whatever, I'm going to go learn who the hell I am, type of thing. If I just did that might close the door. Whereas if I say retire, that might also close some doors. But some people took that as like, wait, you're not 65. How are you doing this? And it did. It got people asking questions.
That's awesome. Cool. So you pull the trigger and you're officially FI at the end of 2019. And tell us about that first year and a half. Like literally, tell us leading up to COVID, and then kind of talk us through like, what was this like during COVID?
Yeah, it was a roller coaster. So after I left my job after Thanksgiving, I took or I guess I'm still on Thanksgiving vacation, I guess, in 2019, a very long one. But we did a little bit of traveling then. My kids were both homeschooled then. My oldest is now actually back in public school, so she's a sophomore in high school and all that kind of stuff. So we did a little bit of traveling. We went over to Mexico, lived there for a few weeks, just kind of to kind of test the waters of like, would we like to go here? And my wife and I are both now like loving to get out of cold Colorado around February. So we were in Mexico in February, just started our new podcast, and we're kind of going through the goofiness of that. Neither of us are very outspoken or like to talk about ourselves. So starting a podcast was very tricky, and talking and trying to get people to listen to the podcast was tricky. But just as we were about to fly back, we kept hearing like, on Mexican TV, like, there's this thing in China going on called the coronavirus. Oh, well, no big deal there. But we've got back into Colorado at the beginning of March. And then it was like, oh, I think, Pacific Northwest is starting to touch land up there and all that kind of stuff. But I really still didn't even worry too much about it until all of a sudden the toilet paper stuff started going on, where it's like, there's no toilet paper. And because I live under a rock mostly, so there's a lot of things that happen in this world that I'm not aware of. I did find out about COVID, or whatever, but I was living under the rock until I didn't see toilet paper. And then I was like, then the kind of nervous side of me is like, oh shit, besides not having toilet paper, what if my tenants don't have jobs? Then kind of the fear started to creep up. The fear never actually, like, we did have some folks that lost their jobs and either took advantage of, and I don't mean that in like the negative sense, but took advantage of some of the facts that we could not evict or still can't in some states during coronavirus. But I never had a tenant that just kind of completely I don't know what the right word is, completely abused the system to where they didn't pay anything or whatever. I had one tenant in Memphis actually that it was about 3 months of lost rent from that unit. They were just paying the bare minimums or whatnot, and then they just moved out, 6 months before their lease broke. And so there wasn't a whole lot I could do as far as recourse, but got the property rehabbed and all that kind of stuff. So really and I don't know if a lot of landlords can say this, but really didn't feel too much of an impact from COVID. So maybe maybe that's a special one-off or whatever, or maybe that's a lot of folks, but I feel very grateful that the two tenants that we manage that ran into coronavirus gave me super advanced notice, like, hey, I just lost my job, but I also am applying for these benefits. I will probably be moving out in 1 to 2 months. So they weren't at all like, hey, I lost my job and guess what? I'm not paying you for the next, 3 or 4 months. They were very open and honest and everything like that. So those ones were very easy to navigate. And a kind of a side benefit is we live in a tiny little town in Colorado, and a lot of people from not Colorado think everything is Denver or the Boulder. Actually, they're like, oh yeah, you live in Colorado, you must be from Boulder or Denver. Well, there's actually more to Colorado than that. So we have our available units go out on the internet, and people that are looking to get out of some of the states that were hit a little bit hard or looking to downsize because they're now remote type people are looking, and they're like, $700 a month rent for a 3-bedroom place. Like, hell yeah. It's like, I've never even heard of this tiny little town, but I'm coming to Colorado for $700 a month rent. So we're fielding all sorts of questions of like people from New York and California and Chicago and all that kind of stuff. And so I guess that's kind of a side benefit of the fact that we have probably 4 tenants now that are transplants here. And I'm always a little dubious. I'm like, if you're leaving a city for a town of 1,200, there's probably going to be some things you aren't expecting. I tell them, do some Google Streets views, like go up and down the neighborhoods, see if the houses look like they want. And our shopping includes Walmart and Safeway. Those are our 2 options, type of thing. But the people that have transplanted are actually, I think, kind of enjoying the slower pace, smaller life, and all that kind of deal. So
amazing. So I want to open it up to Q&A. I also want to hear a little bit more about the 1.5 years, but like I desperately need to use the restroom. So I'm going to mute myself and mute my video, and Anna's going to take over and start fielding questions, and I'll be back in just a minute. But Chris, this has been super inspiring and really awesome. And are you okay for us to keep asking you questions and keep going? We're at about 1 hour and 20 minutes.
I'd love, yeah, I'm here for that. So yeah, hit me with whatever you got.
Cool. Anna, all you.
Perfect. Okay, Chris. So Did you talk much about health insurance yet?
No, that is
Okay.
actually probably the number one or two question we get. So we were going to be on the ACA, but after we did our taxes, um, we actually don't, we are under the threshold of being able to qualify for the ACA, i.e., if you don't fall in this box, either too big or too little, you can, that's when the ACA works or whatever. We're actually below that. So based upon our income, we are on what's Medicaid, but basically it's called Health First in Colorado. So we have a little bit of a we had have a little bit of kind of like an ethical dilemma with that, when the fact that, look, we're probably not the intended folks for the Medicaid system and all of that. So what we do is, or what we've done over the last year and a quarter, is my wife's prescriptions, we pay those out of pocket, even though like with Medicaid, I think they'd be $1 copay or whatever. We don't do that. It's like, hey, look. So we're trying to find that happy balance of like, morally and ethically, I don't want to take advantage of the system, but that's just where we are right now. I know that not everyone is going to be in that situation, so they would need to kind of navigate either the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare system. What I mean, so that is saving us money. Like that would be extra money we'd have, extra expenses we'd have that other folks might not have the, I guess, the benefit or the privilege of not having. So we are doing, I mean, knock on wood, even though my wife has a chronic illness and has to go through a few screenings every year, those screenings now aren't that big of a deal, and her prescriptions are pretty affordable compared to other folks' prescriptions. So we just pay those out of pocket, and all of that. So
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate, that kind of honesty and transparency. And it's interesting to hear the way you think about it. Have you learned about, because you are willing to pay out of pocket and cash, if you've been able to get, you know, the opportunity to negotiate, for example, with pharmacies to say, hey, this is our situation. Just because in my previous experience, I found that during certain periods of my life when I was in a similar situation, I needed to pay for cash because, whatever, I don't have health insurance. And so they were like, oh, well, we've got these subsidies that are just for people like you, or we've got this
mm,
coupon. And it was just like, oh, Sting, you didn't tell me about the coupon before, of
yeah,
course, like I'll be happy to like use that, since I need it. Have you had
yeah.
any of that kind of experience?
Not yet. So we really, I mean, in this year and change, and actually, yeah. So actually, it's probably only been like a year and a month or so, because I did stay on my employer's healthcare through Cobra or whatever for a month. Actually, it was one of those where they covered me all through December of the following, so I actually didn't have to get any kind of coverage until December of, or I mean January of 2020 or whatnot. So we haven't had to have that many conversations. So I think I don't think Debbie's asked the pharmacy or any of that kind of stuff on any benefits. Again, these are not horrible. Like I think we're spending about 70 to 80 bucks a month on prescriptions for my wife. So now if that, and so maybe there's even some benefit there that we could shave that down a little bit more. But if those numbers were hundreds of dollars a month or whatever, we would definitely be having those. But yeah, I don't have any experience with that just yet.
Got it. Okay, great. Another question that came in was about um, your strategy for withdrawing from different account types. So, Stephen was kind of curious if you've thought about, in addition to that real estate income that you're able to, live off of, have you thought about how you might divvy up, drawing out from the taxable versus your Roth versus traditional, retirement vehicles?
Yeah, and it's been a little while, probably January or February, since I really kind of did the mental exercises of that. Um, but it was one of those where it's almost kind of like I have this step up type future to look forward to. Like right now is probably the least amount of cash flow we're going to have because our debt services are fixed. Sure, our insurance and some of the operating expenses will go up with rentals over time, but our rents are going to go up over time. Mortgages are going to get paid off, and then I'll be able to start tapping into most of my most of my investments are held in 40 or IRAs and Roth IRAs type of deal. So those are can't touch them until 59 and a half type of deal. But by 59 and a half, we'll have several of the mortgages paid for. We'll actually be able to tap into some of those investment vehicles. I do have a bit of money, or I've started to in 2020, just play around with. I had some money sitting on the side, and when I saw the market start to tank, there were parts of me that are like, ooh, this could be bad, but I was able to actually keep a pretty even head where I was like, this is temporary. Like, so as soon as that market got down, I took a lot of cash that I was sitting on and put it into non-tax advantaged accounts. So I have made a decent return on that I could start tapping into, but I haven't, and I don't have a plan to do that just yet, just because I'm like, I don't know. I'm just playing around. Like a lot of it's just kind of like my play around money now. Like I'm buying like things that I would not have done 2 or 3 years ago, like buy Tesla and Bitcoin and those kinds of things. I'm doing stupid things like those right now. And I don't suggest like, hey, everybody should do this, even though I've made a decent amount of money on this. It's just kind of like, well, why not? I can screw off with this. And it's kind of fun. It lets me exercise that part of my head or my brain. So
Right, and it's play money for you, right? You're not like, hey,
yeah.
I'm betting the farm and I'm gonna have to go back to work, just because I did this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Did that answer your question, Anna, as far as like, I guess I don't really have any specific withdrawal strategy. I do know that I'll be able to, in another 18 years, be able to tap into my tax advantage accounts. And I don't have a great strategy. I like listening to Choose 5 podcast not Brad, but the Mad Fientist has some really good stuff since he's been 5 for a while now on kind of the best ways to tap into or do Roth conversions and all that kind of stuff. So those are all on the table and things that I pay a little bit of attention to, but I haven't given them a lot of thought or have a dedicated plan yet for those.
Right, and that makes sense because I think Brandon doesn't have any kind of cash flowing investments, so he, I think, is mostly making money off of his blog and maybe other side projects, and also actually like selling stock to
Yeah.
live off
Yep.
of, as opposed to you where it's like, hey, as long as you've got that cash flow coming in, like why touch those investments versus let them grow for as long as possible for the full effect of compounding, right? So that makes sense.
I really have no intention to do that because I have this master calculator that shows all my cash flow, mortgage pay downs, our investment portfolios as they increase, at a given rate or whatever type of thing. And it's like, holy crap, because I'm not going to need to touch at this point. I don't need to touch that money. So it's either just like I'm going to have to find a way to inflate the hell out of our lifestyle, or become, which this sounds a lot better. I want to become more charitable and find ways to use that money for others rather than just being like, well, hell, I got this money. I'll do these crazy things.
Yeah, go buy a boat.
There you go. Yeah,
dock it off some coastal place.
Yep.
Great. So Stephen, since that was your question, if there's any follow-up, feel free to send a follow-up. But I think Chris, you've kind of answered that pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Justin, I don't know if you wanted to ask
There's
anything.
A great question Michael Lee asked. Are you able to travel with your family long term, like 1 to 3 months at a time, and manage your properties remotely?
We've done it twice, once in Ecuador when I still had a job, and once in Puerto Vallarta. Ecuador was right at a month, and Puerto Vallarta was under a month. And the short answer is yes. We do have an Airbnb property that would be tricky to do that, since most of the time it's my oldest daughter and my wife that do the kind of clean and turnover there. But I've marketed that Airbnb property to where it's very incentivized to do monthly, a month or more stay with us. So I try to attract like the traveling nurse type of person because we love those type of folks that stay in there. So that would be the only exception. Mostly I can, as long as I can answer a call or a text message. What we did for Ecuador, because we were off grid, a solid 2 weeks at least there. We have a Google Voice number for our business, and so we just gave that to another friend / landlord in the area, and they installed our Google Voice number on their phone, and we basically gave them the script of, here's what to do. I don't think she even got a call during that time. So she didn't actually have to execute on that script of like, oh, I need to call a plumber, or I need to jot down that so-and-so said they're going to move out at the end of the month or whatever. So 1 month seems, at least so far in the 2 times we've done it, seems fine. And as long as, and as soon as I get a system in place where I'm not the person, either a virtual assistant or whatever, is answering that phone call, like I could easily conceive of we could go longer. Like I'm actually getting ready to disappear myself. My wife's still going to be at home, but I'm going to go disappear and hike 800 miles on the Arizona Trail in 7 days. So I will be almost, completely off grid, other than a satellite text machine that I can chat with my wife back home on or whatever. And I'm not too worried about that and all of that. But I think, yeah, so the short answer is I think we could still self-manage living remotely if we had someone to answer the phone for us indefinitely. If not, then we would at least need to be able to check in, daily or every other day. And most of the time it's going to be checking into a blank inbox or a blank text message, but still need to be there in case something does come up.
Yeah, awesome. So I got a direct message, and I was also curious about it as well. You mentioned the ups and downs of that first year. Some people, myself included, want to know more about the ups and downs of that first year of 5.
Yeah, this is actually probably the thing that I think needs to be talked about the most, that probably doesn't get talked about. The ups and downs are I've kind of even jotted a few things down just in case this came up. Growing up, laziness was basically like the worst thing you could do in my family. Like that was just a stigma that was instilled, where it's like, some of these other vices, nah, that's not that bad, but laziness was not one of those. And I wouldn't exactly call myself a workaholic or some kind of like perfectionist type of deal, but I did not realize until I left my job how much I attributed working as the antithesis of laziness to be. And when I stopped working, I could get in some pretty bad self-talk conversations about how lazy I am, or how dumb I am, or how fortunate I am to have this and no one else has this. And what are you doing? You're reading a book for 2 or 3 hours a day. What kind of asshole does that? You should be out there, just kind of like lots of, you should be doing this. You should be doing something better. You're lazy. You're not a good person, all that kind of stuff. So that's hopefully that I can explain that. That's a down, that's a low. And then I'll 2 days later, it'll be like, oh, someone called me and wants to go ice climbing tomorrow. Of course, my calendar's free. I'm going to go ice climbing tomorrow. So then it's just like being out there, connecting with people, doing something I haven't done in a while. That's amazing. Another thing that I like to say is like, we're still doing kind of the big stuff. So like before I left my job, we could still have a vacation and we still had time together and all that. And we still got the small things done, when I had a job. It's kind of that stuff in the middle that you can stretch even bigger. And that's been another unanticipated high. So an example of that is my dad is really into collecting windmill weights. And he wanted to go to Texas for a week to learn about windmill weights and all that kind of stuff. Now, working Chris is not going to take a week of his vacation time to ride around with my dad in Lubbock, Texas to look at windmill weights that I could care less about. But Chris, with an abundance of time, had an amazing trip with my dad, and we had some great one-on-one conversations that you just don't get, around a Thanksgiving table of 20 people and all that kind of stuff. Being able to visit friends and not have to be like, oh, like how do I make this super efficient where I can do all this kind of stuff? It's like, I want to go visit friends. I can go visit friends now. So those are some big wins that I just didn't see coming. Like some of the stuff as far as like, oh, I can go to Puerto Vallarta for a long time and work remotely, and my wife can go surfing every day and I can go run and all that kind of stuff. Those things, sure, we were able to capitalize on some of those things that we wouldn't have been able to, and we kind of foresaw that. But some of the kind of happy middle stuff is things that I just really didn't see coming. But yeah, so I would say that I guess advice mode would be, you're probably going to run into some situations where a lot of your identity, my wife struggled with this a lot when she left teaching, your identity is wrapped up in teaching. And when you lose the job, the identity goes away with it. And you start to ask yourself, well, who the hell am I? The nice part is you have time to ask yourself that. The not so nice part is you may be tempted to start busying yourself with a whole bunch of other stuff so you don't have to go down that path. You might start volunteering for this thing and doing this thing and doing this thing and all of these things so that you don't have to deal with that big ass question of like, who am I and what's some shit I got to deal with? Because that's a lot of my last year is kind of dealing with my own shit and stuff I didn't even know I had, like that laziness thing. I would have said like, yeah, lazy people, you know, that's something that was frowned upon when I was younger, but I didn't know it was like something like baked into me in my DNA where I'm like trying to redefine what laziness is and all of that kind of thing.
That's thank you so much for sharing kind of that crisis of identity that you went through. So just because I'm personally curious in personal transformation, how did you work through that? Like, how did you like, you know, what were the tools or the things or like yeah, how did you work through that down period?
Yeah, so I like to say this last year has kind of been like a spiritual vagabond journey, and this is from a very pragmatic, uh, not woo-woo type of guy. 3 years ago, I was not woo-woo at all, and now I kind of define myself as a woo-woo hippie spiritual type of guy. But I've filled my head with a lot of podcasts and books about different philosophies and religions, and trying to kind of see what makes the most sense. I am a Christian and I still call myself a Christian, but I'm learning a lot from the Bhagavad Gita and Hinduism and Buddhism and all of that. I'm really latching on to the philosophy of Stoicism. And I used to think like little less stoic, you know, was just like someone that just, you know, is the epitome of like the lowest version of phi, where it's like I never go out to Starbucks, I never go on vacation, I just live in my apartment and I'm, you know, free type of thing, a very ascetic type of life. I I like stoicism because in my understanding of it, it's you're doing these things from time to time that kind of test your comfort zone and test your boundaries so that you really don't get taken out if you lose some of that luxury or lose some of that comfort, but you're still able to enjoy and allow yourself some benefit of life, or if you have wealth, benefit of that wealth. And so stoicism has helped a lot. What's helped a lot in this last month is just I read The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and I've read some other books that just am like, I am on a rock traveling through infinite space and time right now in the middle of nowhere. Who gives a shit, you know, if this little thing that happened to me today, like that is so minuscule or whatever. And so just any time I can kind of reframe my life to realize Chris Emick's problems are not that big of a deal and can kind of just laugh about them, like, you know, oh, that tenant didn't pay this month, or whoa, that was a $1,000 uh, hot water heater that had to be replaced or whatever. Instead of looking at that like, well, what am I going to do and how am I going to take care of this and all that kind of stuff, just looking at like, in 10 years that's going to be, you know, like a mouse fart, you know, as far as like how that impacted my life, and just trying to reframe and understand that. So I follow cool people like Justin David Carl on Instagram that just like that motivate me and lift me up in various ways. I spend a lot of time walking and running. Those two things, when the weather is nice, are huge helpful for me. And yeah, just being around family and friends has been another one. So I could spend hours just talking about this. So, but
That's amazing. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm a fellow woo-woo person, so you're not alone. I feel like woo-woo people in the Phi community are more rare, or at
I
least
think so.
we don't talk, like Phi people don't talk about being woo-woo. So I'm glad to connect with you and find another super woo-woo fellow person, even if you're a late woo-woo bloomer.
Exactly.
Awesome. So I want to circle back to a little bit more like, you know, Phi focus. Nice interlude on the woo woo. That was great. For anyone looking for more meaning in their life, honestly, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer is really, it's easy to read. It's written by someone who was in like entrepreneurship and tech. So it's like, it's not like super weird, like chakra, like crystals. I mean, there's like some chakra stuff in it, but it's like broken down into a way like a 5-person could comprehend. So highly recommend it for people kind of looking to add depth to their life. But someone did ask a much more FI question, which I thought was a great question, which is, do you think Colorado is the best state to be in for retirement, comparing it to California, Oregon, Washington, and Florida, or really any other places? And kind of, I'm going to add on to that. You lived in Puerto Vallarta for, almost a month, Ecuador for almost a month. Like, talk us through kind of like, your thoughts on Colorado versus living in another country versus living in like some other states.
Yeah, so I'm super plugged into Colorado, and I drink the Colorado Kool-Aid and all that kind of stuff. So it's easy for me to say like, yeah, come to Colorado. It's a great state for that. I don't think it necessarily offers any better advantages from a FI perspective than other states. I would say if I was truly doing it from a FI perspective, I'd probably look at a state that didn't have a state income tax or whatever type of thing, or abroad for sure if I wanted to, really ratchet, some of those numbers down. We were kind of, when we went to Ecuador and Puerto Vallarta, uh, part of the reason, like maybe only 10% of the reason, was to kind of dip our toes in the water to look at international places that we might look to live, not permanently. Like I don't think I can ever leave family and friends, year long, but at least, maybe 6 months, 3 months out of the year type of deal. And those, we did a little bit of research while we were there and found like, oh yeah, so our the cost of food and all that kind of stuff, especially in Ecuador and Mexico, was a lot less. The housing, we would easily be able to offset by renting out the house we live in now, Airbnb style, monthly or whatnot. So it seems like we could do that fairly easy. But I would look into, or at least I've got some friends that live a FI remote lifestyle, and they either do what do they call that? Not asylum, but somehow where they like name Texas as their home state, even though they really don't live in Texas, type of thing. They claim that just because it doesn't have a state income tax, so that when they're doing their tax game at the end of the year or whatnot, that's one less tax that they're having to pay, and they're not living there, so they're not paying. Usually states with low or zero state income taxes offset that by having higher sales taxes and all that. But if you don't actually live in the state and you're not spending there, you're just getting the benefit of not having that state income tax.
Yeah. So awesome. I'm curious, like, because I went to Puerto Vallarta and I was definitely like, could I stay here long term? So I'm curious, like, you stayed longer than me. I think I was there for 10 days or a week or something. Like, how was it being there for almost a month? And would you consider being there for like 6 months? Kind of like you said, because obviously the weather is there right now much better than Colorado.
Yeah.
And even California. So I'm just curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I could see that. Because my oldest is in high school, and granted with COVID right now, it's a version of high school or whatnot. We'll definitely not live abroad for a long chunk of time, because we had to do quite a bit of finagling to be able to keep her in public school while we were in Mexico for that month. And she really wants to be here at this high school and all that kind of stuff. My youngest, who is now 10, when my oldest graduates, we might look at doing some of that. And I think Puerto Vallarta would definitely be a place that we could see ourselves landing, for the winter months. Especially like January through maybe mid-March. I'm a gardener, so I love to get back, when spring hits in Colorado and I can start playing around in my garden again and all that kind of stuff. And actually, that's what I think Colorado's springs and falls, at least where we live, are some of the best reasons, the best seasons here and all that kind of stuff. But I think my wife and I especially could easily see no kids when we're in no kids land, definitely living in Latin South America. Southeast Asia is also on our radar, but neither of us have really been over there. So we're using that vicariously through other friends that have traveled over there and their Instagram feeds, and like, yeah, we could do Chiang Mai, Thailand too.
Portugal?
Portugal is one. I assumed since it was Europe they would be high, but I follow a YouTube channel of a family that retired over there or fied into
Regular?
Portugal. What's that?
Rich and regular?
No, it's Our Rich Journey.
Oh, sorry, Our Rich Journey.
Amon and Christine, I think. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm confusing two different.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Awesome. So I do want to jump into a little bit like of the things that you do for fun. Like obviously I follow you on Instagram. He's an awesome person to follow on Instagram. For those who are on Instagram, he does a lot of trekking and a lot of like camping, and as kind of his bio for this, like this meetup, he poops in the woods a lot. So like let's talk a little bit about your adventuring, in the outdoors. Like where did that passion come from? How has it been in the last year and a half being able to kind of like do more of that? How was that through COVID?
Yeah. So I would say I've been an outdoor enthusiast at least, since my mid 20s. Living in Colorado, we'd always go to the mountains, both to ski during the winter and to just get away from the hotter area where we live up to the cooler area of the mountains in like July and August. But it was mainly just kind of like go up there in a car, drive around, hang out in a town or whatever. But then one year we went to Alaska, and my wife was doing like a whale watching thing, and I don't do well on small boats, so I'm like, I'll just hang out in town today. And I went to a used bookstore and just bought all sorts of books about Alaska, and several of them had to do with the mountain Denali. It used to be called Mount McKinley or whatever. But so I was like, oh, someday maybe I'll climb this, like as a bucket list type thing. I'll climb Denali. And so as I'm reading through some of these books, I'm like, well, and if I want to climb, the highest peak in the north, in North America, I better at least climb some of these peaks in my own backyard. In Colorado, we have these things called 14ers, which are peaks above 14,000 feet in elevation. We have 54 of those. So I was like, well, maybe I'll start off by climbing those, and just getting outdoors. To do that, I really didn't even think of it as like, oh, I love the outdoors, I'm going to go do this. But in an effort to, I better learn how to climb a mountain before I try to climb the tallest mountain in North America. I started falling in love with it right away. I went out with friends and I loved that. And I also went out solo and I loved that too. That's honestly where my biggest connection with God, with Source, happens, is when I'm in the mountains by myself. And like there's been times I'm just cruising along and all of a sudden, and I just see this thing, and it'll drop me to my knees and I'll be bawling, and I'm like, whoa, how did this happen? So yes, I do love the outdoors, and some of the things that I've been able to do with not having a job now is, spending a lot of time in the outdoors. So what used to be just going out to these hikes on the weekends that everybody else is going out to, especially now that a lot of people have come from California and enjoyed our state. Our trailheads, especially around the Denver area, are insane on the weekends. So thankfully, I live down south and I hike on Wednesdays where the trailheads are not insane. So I can just kind of go and cruise out, and I don't have to interact with people, or I don't have to pass 20 people and get passed by 20 people and all that kind of stuff. So that's skiing on a Tuesday, amazing compared to skiing on a Saturday. It's unreal, and all of that. So that is kind of like just being able to enjoy the weekdays as though they were my weekends has been super helpful. And then I can still do the weekend stuff with friends and I guess normal people that have jobs, because those are free too. So I just love having, I guess, that flexibility. I intended to hike the entire Pacific Crest Trail. I had my permit for March, and lo and behold, this coronavirus thing happens. And so I thought maybe it's not the best idea to hop on a plane, go to California, which seemed to be have it worse than Colorado, and seemed to be very they had a stronger opinion, I guess, of what people should and shouldn't be doing during COVID. And so I was like, I don't want to mess around by being out in California and getting stranded out there, and or potentially being someone that comes into a town, gets the disease, and then takes it to another town or whatever. So I didn't want to do the Pacific Crest Trail. So in May, as kind of a plan B, I hiked segments of the Continental Divide Trail, which is actually, so the Pacific Crest Trail goes through California, Oregon, Washington from Mexico to Canada. The Continental Divide Trail goes from New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, Mexico to Canada. And so I thought, well, the fact that it's in New Mexico, that's only one state south of me. My wife can drop me off at the trail. I figured that'd be more COVID friendly. Like I wouldn't be doing anything to jeopardize people's health and all that. And I wasn't at all worried about being out in the woods as being a bad place to be during a pandemic. I was like, well, as long as I can get food every 4 or 5 days, I'm going to be okay. And I don't think they're going to close down grocery stores, because if they do, the world's going to be in a very bad place or whatnot. So I spent a lot of May, or all of May, hiking and pooping in the woods, and that also had some highs and lows from that, because that's a lot of time with yourself. That's a lot of time challenging yourself in a good way, and challenging yourself, and some of the little negative voices have a lot of time to just do their magic, as far as like, a good dad wouldn't be out on the trail right now, a good dad, a good husband would be doing this, a good person would be doing that, or whatever. But all in all, I got a lot of time in nature in 2020. I loved it, and even the bad moments taught me something, so I can take some appreciation from them too. 2021, I have a lot of things on the calendar for doing outdoor stuff as well. So really excited for that.
Awesome. So we're, approaching the last 9 minutes, and we always like end on time. So let's talk about like what you do have planned for this coming year. Kind of as you move into, past the year and a half of FI and really onto year 2 of FI. What are the plans for this year? And maybe also before that, actually, like, how has it been for your wife and your kids? Like, being like a FI family, so to speak. That's not something we touched on, and I'm actually really curious about that. And I'm sure other people are too.
Yeah, so it's hard to kind of separate what would life look like without coronavirus, and I'm retired, and what would life, so we know what life looks like now with coronavirus, and I'm retired, and that all of us are in the house a lot. So we get a lot of time with each other, which is a good thing and can be a negative thing or whatever type of thing. So the impact it's had is, especially with homeschooling my 10-year-old, I've got a lot more energy and I guess ability to help with that. She's very independent, so it's not like, I'm spending 6 hours a day like, and this is how Pythagorean's theorem works, or and all that kind of stuff. It's more of just like checking in and finding out what lights her up, and then finding ways to get her to learn anything. If it's something that lights her up, try to get her to learn that. So I have a lot more freedom and time to kind of do that. And if we want to go use nature or go to a museum to do it or whatever, that's really cool. So I'm loving that. I'm doing these like daddy-daughter dates where I read a book called The Family Board Meeting. And in that, it's basically like get one-on-one time with each of your kids at least once a quarter, where you put the phone away and you put all the distractions away, and it's just you and that kid. And so I've done a few of those kind of atypical ways of doing that with my daughters that I've loved. My homeschooling daughter, it's nice because we can go to the climbing gym on a Wednesday because that's what she wanted to do, or go ice skating on a Tuesday or whatever. My daughter that's in public school, we can have a fun weekend trip and all that kind of thing. We went to Vegas because I love to use credit cards to get free travel and all that. So we went to Vegas, and I had free flights and free hotels while we were there. And she just wanted sushi, so I was like, well, let's go to Vegas to get sushi, And so anyways, it's been great. And my wife and I have a lot of time together to where we can spend an hour to 2 hours in the morning having coffee and tea together, and just have good conversation and all of that. Whereas a lot of times we'd be starting to have a conversation and like, okay, well, I got to take my coffee and run, I'm out the door and all that kind of thing. And we can work out together and all that. So as far as family life, those have been huge. Those have been very important to me and very meaningful to me. And then what was the other question? Family life and, what's up for 2021?
Correct. And that's the last thing, really.
Yeah. So family trips, we've got a week in Tahoe planned with like my father-in-law and their crew, and my family will do part of the Tahoe Rim Trail while we're out there. And then I'm going to go hike the Arizona Trail, which will be most of March and into April. I'm going out to Zion to do this thing called a Ragnar run, and it's kind of like an all-day trail run relay and all that. Actually, I need another runner or two. So if any of y'all are looking for that, go ahead and hit me up on that. And then gonna be home a bit for the summer because my girls both swim and it's swim season. So we'll probably hang out here around June and July, and then we've got an Alaska trip planned for the fall that may or may not happen with Canada's deal. But yeah, so we've got some travel. Those are kind of like the big highlight things. But again, it's kind of that medium stuff that that kind of misses maybe the headlines or whatever that gets to happen that you just don't think about until it's like, oh, like again, like I had some great trips with uncles and aunts and all that kind of stuff that I wouldn't have probably been like, yeah, I'm going to take a few days off to go hang out with an uncle or an aunt or whatever type of thing. It's like, I'll see you at Christmas, you know, or I'll see you at Thanksgiving or whatever. Now it's like, well, I can see you when I see you. My family owns a big ranch, and so I get to go pretend I'm a cowboy, you know, for a couple days, and then when it gets hard, I can head back home and everything. So
Cool. Well, any last words of wisdom or experience that you would like to share, kind of in closing, before we tell people the best place to find you online and wrap this meeting up?
What you're doing right now is very huge. The fact that you're talking about it, everyone, I'm talking to everyone here, the fact that you're talking about it, the fact that you're engaging in community, that's huge. The first few years, I felt like I was in a vacuum and just doing this thing, you know, on my own or trying to figure it out by listening to these podcasts and all that. So thankfully I had those podcasts and those books that could fill my head full of knowledge. But until I was able to start talking to other people, until I went to Camp Fi and met Anna and started talking to all these other folks and just hearing their stories, it just, I mean, it changed the game for me. And I just think that that's a huge piece. You know, if you want to grow, you know, don't grow alone. You know, find someone's that you can find two people that are your new Phi companions. Do that, or you can go to Phi meetups or jump on these calls. I think the community element is huge, and that's really what with Go Bucket Yourself. What we want to do is create an environment for community to happen using nature and some other things that we feel are important to help people grow or whatever type of deal.
Amazing. Cool. Best place to find you online if people want to connect with you after this?
So yeah, our website is gobucketyourself.com. From there, the most active thing that you can find is our podcast. We've got about 32 episodes over the last year of that, and you can feel free to listen to that. You can find my wife's book there as well. But Instagram, especially during March, if you want to see a guy walking through the woods or walking through Arizona and dealing with drinking out of cow shit tanks and all that kind of stuff, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Bucket Yourself. Go Bucket Yourself was taken on Instagram by a guy that likes to get his dog on buckets and do tricks. So unfortunately, at Go Bucket Yourself is not my Instagram handle, but at Bucket Yourself is my Instagram handle, which you can find that on my website as well, gobucketyourself.com. But I love to connect. Like almost always from these kinds of conversations, if people want to reach out and ask questions about real estate, mindset, woo-woo, whatever it happens to be, hit me up. You won't be a bother to me. I will be slow answering you in March because I will be off the grid, but I will get back to you, I promise.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Chris, thank you so much for 2 hours, 2 full hours of Q&A and interviewing, sharing your energy, your wisdom, your experience, and not being afraid to share the nitty-gritty numbers or the emotional landscape. Really special time with you. So thank you so much for doing that. For everybody, as we wrap this up, if you want to leave your best place to contact you, email, Instagram, Facebook link, put that in the comments now. And reach out to anybody individually that maybe was in an area that you're interested in or close to you. But like Chris said in his closing words, like, build the community, build your FI community, build your FI friends. This is a perfect opportunity. Everyone here is interested in the same thing and potentially interested in connecting with you. So definitely put that in the chat. One last shameless plug for me. The snack box and protein bag is actually tied to a talk I did with a holistic content creator about finding and creating meaningful work. So I'll post the link there again. So actually very apropos to kind of this whole thing is, at least while you're on the FI journey, doing meaningful work, and even afterwards doing meaningful work. So stay tuned. Next month, we got Mindy and
Scott Trench.
Scott Trench, who I met Scott Trench at a Camp FI, and he's a super amazing person. I have not had the chance to meet Mindy yet, so I'm super excited. That'll be on the 27th of next month, and Anna will put up all the details there. So everyone, thank you so much for spending 2 hours with the FI community virtually. It was such a pleasure. And Anna, I'm going to toss it over to you if you have any last recommendations or announcements or things to say.
Nope. I think the only one I have is keep an eye out for the Facebook threads, because we'll probably start collecting questions. And, you know, depending on how many questions there are, I'll want to make sure that if you have a good question, it gets upvoted, that we ask that to the guests next week. And otherwise, have a great spring, right? I'm super excited. Like next week is the first week of March, and I'm already seeing lots of sunshine. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like getting blinded by the sunshine here in Colorado, which has been, as Chris knows, like a very nice change from like the -5 Fahrenheit weather we've been having. So yes. Enjoy your first few days of spring. I know I'll be.
Awesome.
And thank you again so much, Chris, for being.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I loved it. Thanks for the questions, and have a great one, y'all.
Thanks, brother.
Bye-bye.
And we'll post this up on Facebook. I'll put this on YouTube, and you know, if people want to share this, actually I'll hit. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm going to hit stop on the recording.